Welcome to 247 Real Talk. I'm your host, Julian Perry. It's a pleasure to be here with you for another week. Usually I give you a little intro to my episodes before I start, but we're going to talk about what's on my mind this week, again with some personal sharing. So, relax, and I'll be right back. So welcome back to 247 Real Talk Podcast. Again, my name is Julian Perry. I'm your host, and it's a pleasure to be here with you. As most of you know, I usually come up with episode topics that are things that we deal with in society. I had several things I've wanted to talk about for the last few weeks, but something happened. Last week, I decided to share something personal, and it was about my struggle and advocacy for my son, who is scored very high on the autistic spectrum, but who is in the odd position of what we would call, and I don't want to offend anyone because I know what this is like, but they call him someone of normal behavior who is autistic. So from first appearances, he seems like a normal child. He interacts like a normal child from a distance. But as you get to know him, as you get to hang around him for a few minutes or half an hour, then you'll begin to realize the autistic spectrum and why he scored that way. For some reason last week I felt the need to share, and I don't usually have conversations about personal issues here. What I didn't anticipate, and what I'm so humbled and grateful for, was the outpouring of support I received as a response. People shared the podcast like everywhere. People are still talking about the podcast. People are still emailing me. People are still texting me. People found relatives in different states who are in the education system and got advice and opinions and suggestions and sent them to me. People supported me and just offered words of support and comfort and wisdom and strength like I've never seen for any other episode of my podcast. And understand something. I forgot to announce this last week, but last week was my 150th podcast. So we're at 151 tonight. 150th episode, of course. And when I thought about what I was going to talk about tonight, going back to the topics I had lined up, I realized that based on what happened this past week, we need to talk a little bit more about our kids. And especially kids who are struggling with autism and kids who are struggling, period, right? Because there are a lot of behavioral issues that we don't understand and we tend to take for granted and we tend to respond to the wrong way with kids. So I'm going to do two things or a couple of things tonight. The first one is I want to tell you a little bit about my wife and her dealing with this. She's an advocate. She's a foreign-trained doctor. She's an MD. She is tenacious. She recognized very early that after my son was diagnosed that no one was offering her support. No one was offering her support in the sense that, okay, you recognize something is wrong. They do the IEP, they do all the other testing. He comes back as scoring high on the autism spectrum, and then what? There are programs out there, many things that apparently exist, but there's no one in his school, no one that was a part of that testing that said, parents, come, let's talk to you. Let's tell you what to do next, where to step, what to apply for, how to move forward, what's best for him. And so I'm gonna talk a little bit about what she went through in the last few weeks, and then I'm gonna talk a little bit about my son. So in her advocacy, in her efforts to find help for him. She kept searching, and I'm going to look down my phone for a second because I don't recall exactly the type of treatment she was or help she was seeking, but it had something to do with speech therapy and occupational therapy or something like that. And forgive me as I look down here because I want to get it right. What I'm not going to do in this episode, I don't think I'm going to do it anyway right now, is tell you the name of the organization that finally responded. So she applied, she did her research and she found several places, and she contacted a few of them, and eventually, I don't want to say eventually. So she contacted a few of them, and no one responded. She sent emails. I think there was one that initially responded. She tried to follow up. She sent emails after emails, phone calls, messages, voicemails, and no matter what, they wouldn't respond. And as I said, I'm trying to find the name. It's hard because we do a lot of brainstorming, so there are a lot of texts that she and I share back and forth as thoughts come to mind, and so there's a lot to read through to find exactly what service she was referring to. It's called speech and language therapy. Now I live in Long Island, New York. Okay, to be a little bit more specific, I live in Nassau County, New York. I'm going to leave you to draw your own conclusions as to what places I could be speaking about. But after weeks of trying and leaving messages with no response, she said, I'm going to send one final email and tell these people how I really feel. She did that and she got a response. Someone called, apologized for not getting back, but with no explanation why it took weeks. Nevertheless, they set up an appointment for my wife to take my son to their place of business, their organization, last Saturday to observe him. As I understand it, she explained to me they observed him as playing by himself. They observed him playing with groups and different things for quite a few hours. And when they were done, the observations came to the same conclusion that he needed this assistance, this help. And they agreed they would do home visits and that they would send some forms to my wife to fill out on Monday morning so they can get started. Today is Thursday. It's Thursday night. It's May 11th. I'm looking at the clock behind my camera. It's 9:42 p.m. and we've heard nothing. They've basically gone silent again. They've ghosted us. These are the people that parents who are struggling with children with these challenges are supposed to depend on. These are people who get on there and claim that they are part of the solution. These are the people who probably get money from the government, the federal government, everywhere to subsidize or to fund their programs that are designed to help these children, and they do not want to help. It is amazing that they actually got to the point where they met with my son and still no help, after agreeing that he definitely needed this help. And the reason I wanted to spend a little time on my wife is because my wife is a true mother. Her children, her family is everything to her. Both of us as parents are invested in our children, and she as a mother is no exception. I see when they hurt, she hurts. Especially when my son is struggling, she struggles. So you have to understand, when she finally got a response and finally got to take him and finally got all this positivity and promise, how elated was she? She was, how relieved she was, how pumped up she was, what the feeling of accomplishment she had of finally being successful at getting him help he needs. When I spoke with her today, I could hear the sadness and despondence in her voice. Another organization had let her down. Another organization that's designed to help kids in this manner had let her down. I don't know what the legal implications are, which is the only reason why I'm not telling you the name of the organization tonight. Tonight when I came home, she was filling out a form that goes back to the school that apparently through her, she spoke to the psychologist. She spoke to several people today, the school psychologist. I forgot all the different people she spoke with today, but she feels that she's making some progress again. But in terms of the service that has ghosted us, basically, she has to start all over again and find another one. There are others out there, but they're so difficult to get responses. Now, I'm not sure if they're overwhelmed. I'm not sure if they're doing um, the possibility of just taking these funds and filling their pockets. But it bothers me when we hear our president and our officials, all from the president down, get up and talk about monies they're putting aside for children, autism, and children need help and childcare and this and that. And the people who need it can't get it. Not even when the organizations advertise on every web forum and claiming to give this service. These same organizations that charge health insurance companies for services that they render. And what's going on here? We have a few theories of what has happened here, but I'll keep that to myself. Now I'll move on to share with you parents, the literally hundreds of you who took the time to listen to the podcast and the dozens of you who reached out to me and talked about your children and shared with me. Let me tell you about my son. And I'm purposely saying my son. I'm not calling his name because I just think that's the appropriate thing to do at this point, especially in a forum like this. I'll tell you some things as a parent that I've seen and I saw, and maybe you who have interacted and you who will eventually get to listen to the episode will identify and feel what I'm feeling and feel the connection we have and the connection we need to make as parents who have children with these challenges so that we can come together and make a change and make a difference and make sure our children get what they need, because they are autistic children. Children on the autistic spectrum are brilliant children. The gifts that they have. I talked last week about my son's technology and the things he builds. He builds robots, whether it be from Legos, whether it be from parts of other things I have around the house. You would be amazed. I promise. If he had to focus without his medication, I promised him that if we can get to that point, I would start a YouTube channel so the world could see his brilliant mind. But let me tell you about him. I'll give you a few stories, and hopefully other parents will connect with this. He, first of all, lacks social skills. And because of that, he's an introvert. At recess at school, he doesn't want to play with the other kids. He just wants to sit quietly in the corner. Actually, he doesn't want to sit quietly in the corner. He wants to do something else that he likes to do. But we are now fighting with the school to find out if you have teachers and specialists in the school who are there specifically for children with these challenges, how come they don't know not only how to deal with this, but how come they don't have things in place knowing that these children go through this sort of introverted behavior and tendencies. We've heard other parents tell us about other schools that provide options for recess where they can go to a different room and go on the computer in terms of doing programming or go to the technology room and work with the robots and the building stuff. And his school doesn't let him do that. So what does he have to do? Since he doesn't like to socialize, their solution for my son is for him to sit by himself in a corner out in the playing field watching the other kids for the entire recess. That's all they have for him. These are the same schools and same teachers that claim that they have mixed classrooms with experts and trained teachers who handle these situations, but they can't. My son has a problem with his personal space. Now, any individual has that, but he's a little different. And one of the challenges he's been dealing with is he's in a mixed class. So there's children who, he's maybe only one of two kids who are high on the autistic spectrum that behave normally. The rest are I don't know what the exact term is, so please forgive me because me having a child in this situation, I'm not trying to offend. I don't do that in any forum anyway. But let's call them children who are more readily identified as autistic, meaning their behavior is more pronounced. And so they will come up to my son and stand in his face and stare at him. It's part of their autism. But it's something that he can't deal with because he has got a more confusing situation. He's a child who behaves normally, but has all these autistic challenges. So he ends up getting yelled at by the teacher because he will say stop, 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 and the autistic kids and the other kids won't move because that's their behavior. But since he can't interact, he'll get loud to stop, and then the teachers, instead of using their skill set to figure out how to deal with the situation, they yell at him. So 4 out of 5 days he comes home from school, and I say, "How was your day?" And he says, "I had a bad day." And I said, "What happened?" He says, "I don't want to talk about it." Eventually, as the day goes on, the evening goes on, he will start to talk about it. But imagine teachers in this school yelling at the autistic child because he doesn't know how to process what he's dealing with. He likes to watch TV, and as I mentioned before, in our dining room, and there's a TV in there, and he's in there by himself. And I'll go in there from time to time with him and sit and eat and chat with him, and he'll tolerate me, his father. But most times he'll say, if you go in there and you're just sitting with nothing to do, he'll say, "Can you leave? I don't want you in here. Can you leave?" He wants to be alone. But what is he watching on TV? All these shows that have to do with robots and creation and Legos. And he'll sit there. We bought him tons of Legos, not the baby ones, but the ones that adults uses. And you should see the things this child builds. I look at him and I say, "How did you come up with that?" And I'm not just talking about putting blocks together. I'm talking about things that have functionality that look like something you would buy at Toys R Us. I remember another situation where. So let me pause here for a second and tell you about his home life. He has a sibling. He has a younger sister. There are, let me get this right, they're 18 months apart, but they're very close. They fight all the time, as siblings would, but they're very close. It's a sister. He's a boy, she's a girl. We got a boy and a girl. And she is the only one that can go into his space. And even then, she knows when not to go into his space. I remember one day they started out playing, and sometimes with these kids, playing turns into arguing or whatever. And most kids can tell when they've reached the threshold, right? When they're playing, it becomes obnoxious or something, and then most kids will purposely be obnoxious and purposely do these things because they want to antagonize. He can't tell the difference. He just keeps going. And she's getting more and more agitated. She's saying, "Stop, stop, stop, stop." And he is messing with her at this point, brother, sister. We call it messing with her. And he's laughing. But she is aggravated and the volume is going up. And my wife says to him, "Stop." And he wouldn't stop. And my wife says, "Stop." And she says it not yelling, but in a strong, forceful stop. And I'm sitting across the room looking at this interaction. And when she says stop, he goes from laughing to completely sad in a microsecond. It changed so much from happiness to sadness so quickly that I was sitting there in shock. But not just in shock. I was sitting there in pain. Because he went from this happy child, and the minute she said stop, and he could not process what was going on anymore, he went immediately to this dark place. And he put his head down. And then he raised his head and he kind of rubbed his hand. And he walked away quietly. And he went and he sat down and he watched TV quietly. I sat there for a while not knowing exactly what to do or say. So I got up a few minutes later and I walked into the dining room where he was sitting. I took a peep at him where he couldn't see me. And he was sitting there watching TV and he was so sad. He can't link the emotions. He can't process the emotions. And her abrupt stop, meaning, okay, enough is enough. For some reason at that moment, and it's not the first time she's told him stop, and it hasn't done, but that day his interaction was so pronounced. And I learned something that day too. I learned that as he's getting older, his struggle is getting bigger. He needs more help. He was brilliant in math. He's still good at math, but he's beginning to lose interest not because he doesn't like math anymore, but because I realized of the challenges he's facing at school. There is something system, I forgot the name of it, where when he takes those exams, those state exams or whatever, for children like him, they allow him to have someone who will read the question to him, the math question. And when they read the math question to him, he does it. And he scores very high, sometimes 100. But if he had to read the question himself, and he can read, he reads books, but there is something with the numbers and the words that he gets lost. But if you read it to him, he knows how to do the equation and everything. He is sometimes very happy, sometimes very agitated. And when you look at it, you can't define what's causing his change and his swing in moods. It's something very interesting too. I have one brother, an elder brother, who, when we were growing up, we now figure he was at least ADHD. And those days, no one knew what it was about. We tried everything. We talked to everyone. Back in those days, there was no help. We didn't know what was up with him. As he got older, I don't know if he outgrew it or he learned to deal with it and handle it, and he's lived so far, continued to live a very successful life. Successful in his job, good job, everything else. But what's amazing is he and my son have this connection that no one else has. It's like when my son sees him, his whole world changes. He can't wait to see my brother to come and visit. And my brother says older than I am, but my brother will get down on the ground and play with him, and the two of them will play together like they're two little kids, and they completely identify with each other. As I said, my brother grew up with ADHD. And I'm understanding now that's likely part of the connection. That they have an unspoken understanding within them of each other. The bottom line here is we deal with this every day. We deal with the challenges of instructing him to do something. It took time for us as parents to recognize that he can only process one instruction at a time. Like I mentioned last week, if you need him to do A, B, and C, you can't tell him A, B, and C. You have to keep telling him to do A. Once he's accomplished A, you can move on to B. If you give him A, B, and C to do it, it'll never happen. He doesn't have the focus long enough. He knows what you told him. He knows what he has to do, but between A and B, he's going to go off to Z. And it's challenging because without his medication, he can't go to school and do schoolwork because he can't focus. We watch him at home a few times. We try not to give him the medication on the weekends because there's so many side effects of the medication. Let me talk about that for a little bit. One side effect is that he loses his appetite. And at one point he was losing weight. So we found that a balance, since he needed the medication from Monday through Friday, we found that it was a good balance on Saturday and Sunday to not give it to him, and he would eat us out of house and home. We literally have to go do groceries sometimes. And he's not a big kid. The other side effect that we struggle with is, and they've given him 2 or 3 different types of medication over the last 4 or 5 years. We tried them, slow release, quick release, this brand, that brand. He has a specialist that he sees every few months, and they reevaluate his behaviors from a medical behavioral facility. The last medication he was taking really messed with his emotions. I think I mentioned this last week too. He would just start crying out of nowhere. And the hard part is you have to look at your child and try to cheer him up. Usually when a child cries, you can say to that child, "What's wrong?" "Oh, I fell and hit my toe." "Oh, my brother or sister hit me." or whatever. No, the medication made him cry with no reason. He just got sad and started crying. And we thought something was going on. We called the teachers, we checked the school, we looked at his environment, nothing changed. And then we said, wait a minute, the medication changed. Let's speak to his doctor. And when we spoke to his doctor, they changed the medication. Lo and behold, the crying stopped. These children are struggling. And it is a crying shame that we as parents are part of a society that has a voice to vote and elect officials who have the power to manage our environments and to provide services for everyone with every challenge. I have done several episodes on people with mental health issues. They're in the same boat because a lot of these organizations who claim to help actually take the money. The president of the organization makes $1 million a year. Why does the president of a nonprofit have to make $1 million a year? What are they doing in their jobs that you and I are not in ours? But the bottom line is everybody's out for money, and what the kids get, what the mental health patients get, the homeless people, all these different people who struggle and who we take for granted because we don't suffer from the same things. They get the crumbs that are left after everyone has filled their pockets. You listen to the budget that the president announces and how many millions and millions of dollars towards child this and child that and autism and this and that. Nothing. I'm going to applaud the mayor of New York, Mayor Eric Adams. I'm going to give him a hand. Because just today he signed an order that the New York City Police Department get training to understand how to deal with autistic people, adults, children, whatever, because he found out that since the police cannot discern the difference between someone who is criminal and someone who has autistic behavior patterns, they are causing more harm than good when they approach people who suffer from autism. And they make misdiagnoses as someone resisting arrest, someone creating a public disturbance. And so they use brute force to subdue the person, not understanding that person has no control of what they're doing. So I applaud you, Mayor Eric Adams, for being proactive. I wish more governors, more mayors, more public officials would start paying attention to these things. We who live so-called quote-unquote normal lives, we take a lot for granted. I took a lot for granted. I no longer do that. I was part of the problem that I'm calling the problem today. I became part of the solution, not because I had some brainstorm, but because God decided to give me a treasure in my life, my son. And in the process to make me someone who sits before you in this podcast as an advocate for change, an advocate for a better life, an advocate for helping those who are less fortunate, an advocate for those who have been victims. I constantly ask you, my podcast, to do two things: subscribe and share. Not because I'm after those celebrities, want to be like those celebrities who are making a ton of money. This is not about that. Everything in this studio, every piece of equipment, and there's thousands upon thousands of dollars in equipment, came out of my pocket. And I continue to invest in what I am and who I am. I continue to give money to nonprofit organizations that help the poor, that provide food, like food pantries and those sorts of things. But I want to do more. I need to do more, and I need more of you with me to make a difference. The voices have to be heard. I didn't look up the country before, and I should have, but I want to make an analogy. And please forgive me for my ignorance with this, but there's a president, I think, whose name is Imran Khan, in some country in the Middle East or somewhere, who was jailed because of something. And today they released him. And they released him and asked him to please ask his supporters to stop. They released him and asked him to have his supporters to stop because his supporters decided they were going to support him and were causing such havoc and chaos in their resistance that the society was unable to function anymore. And the point I'm making here, in the analogy I'm making here, is not for us to do anything like that. The point I'm making is those people who supported this man recognize that there's power in numbers. Recognize that when we get together and stand united for a common cause, those who are listening hear us better. And those who refuse to listen are forced to hear us. And those who never knew about it before, like me, learn something new. I've got more years behind me than I have ahead of me, unless I live to an incredible age. What I've got to do, and one of the purposes of my life, has to be to leave a legacy of power, empowerment, and a legacy of uplifting people to those who are coming after us. If we want our children of tomorrow to have any chance at this life that gets harder every day, we've got to leave them the tools. And we cannot decide that those who are born a little different or have different challenges will be just pushed to the wayside. Again, people who are autistic have incredible minds. I've seen my son's incredible mind. My job as a parent is to find that path for him to show his brilliance to the world and to make a contribution to this world that makes a difference in the world. The other parents I've spoken to who are struggling with children with autism are struggling. And when I look at some of them, even though I'm struggling to get the right treatment and environment for my son, I feel blessed when I look at the struggles they're having. I feel fortunate because those children who are not only high on the autistic spectrum like my son, but have autistic behavior, present a challenge that parents struggle with. The energy it takes to just manage my child. Because when he's not on the medication, he's playing like a boy, he's having fun, but he's not playing at our level here. He's playing here. He's playing 10 levels above any other child. So his energy level is what we use the term bouncing off the wall, so to speak. He's not literally doing that, but you get what I'm saying. And I've seen parents with children walking around who are autistic and they're struggling and they've got like 3 children. 2 are not autistic, 1 is, and they're trying to manage the 2 who are doing children things. And then this one that's doing children things but doing it in an autistic way. And you can see that their lives are exhausting and they need help. And I got to tell you again, I am so grateful for all of you who have reached out to me. When I thought about doing this episode tonight, I thought about so many other things I wanted to tell you. In case you don't know, I don't ever script my episodes. I speak to you for whatever comes to my mind and my heart at that moment. So I gave you a little bit of insight into my son. A few more things I'll say. He has an issue with understanding boundaries in terms of when something should be stopped. For instance, if he asks you for, can I have an apple? You'll say, okay, give me a second. Can I have an apple? All right, give me a second. Can I have an apple? All right, I'll give it to you. Can I have an apple? He doesn't get that you're telling him he'll get it in a moment. All he can see is he's asking and you're not immediately feeling that need. And you have to, in the beginning it was very hard. My wife and I have gotten better at it because you have to recognize, take a deep breath. You hear him. You've told him. Now you have to finish what you're doing and then get him his apple with, in the back of your ear, can I have an apple? You're not getting me my apple. Can I have an apple? Why are you not giving my apple? And this is just because he just doesn't know any other way. And this is with everything. He takes things literally too. Really literally. And so you have to be careful how you speak to him and what you say to him, because the way you and I would interpret something that we call normal everyday talk, he will not. He will take things literally. Okay? I mean, not to this extent, but I'm trying to say, like, for instance, if the other day we had a conversation and I think I was wishing his grandmother good luck with an interview or something, and I said, break a leg. And he says, why would she break her leg? Why would you want her to break a leg? And I said, no, it's an expression that means, good luck. And he says, but why would she break a leg? And he is very literal. He cannot, see things any other way. It's through his eyes. I'm sure you parents out there who are struggling, not just with autism, and I don't want it to make you feel that because my child is struggling with this, that's all my advocacy is about. I want to hear from you. I want to hear about what else your children are struggling with that I don't know about. Maybe we can help each other. Maybe I can use the same energy in my wife and we can do some research for you if you're struggling like we are, and maybe we'll be lucky enough to find help that you need. I need all of you to share this podcast. I need all of you to subscribe, because the more you subscribe, the bigger my audience gets. I honestly want to get to the point where I'm generating the kind of income through my various endeavors that I can put money back into helping our kids. I have everything I need. I don't need to buy anything. I don't need a salary. I've never paid myself off of this. What this is about is making a difference in this world. You've heard me say it time and time again. In my opinion, in my heart, what I do with this podcast is the debt and the price I'm paying to occupy a space on this earth. So I'm asking you to join me on this journey. I don't know the folks that you know, but maybe you can help them by sharing my voice, my opinion, this podcast with them. Let's build a community. Let me join with you to hold those who are accountable. And let's keep each other honest and accountable. It's always my pleasure to speak with you. The last 2 episodes have been a little difficult to share because I've been strong through them, but these things really touch my heart about my child. And I pray that you have found some strength through what I'm telling you. And maybe for those of you who feel like you're up against a wall, will see that I'm offering an alliance and a way out by joining together to force a difference, and maybe to start our own thing, our own foundation that makes a difference. Again, it's been my absolute pleasure to speak with you. And again, thank you so much for those of you who continue to send words of support and who reached out to me over the past week and who will reach out to me over the next week and months, and who will help me, help myself, and help you do what's right for our children and our families, for our kids and our grown-ups who are dealing with mental health issues, for all of those who are struggling with some capacity, who need our help, who can't do it otherwise. Because we know we certainly can't depend on the officials who tell us lies so they can get our votes and then do nothing to help us. Do have a great week ahead. I look forward to hearing from you. I look forward to seeing you subscribe. I look forward to you listening to the episodes. And until we chat again, have a great weekend, a great week ahead. Take care of yourselves, take care of your families, and take care of each other.